Welcome to the All Eers podcast, powered by HD Media.
Football season is upon us here, not only in the state of West Virginia, but also nationwide, as college football teams across the state of West Virginia and also beyond, not only in the Appalachian region, but also nationwide, are gearing up for the upcoming 2026 season. And man, a lot of excitement across the board, especially from a Big 12 conference perspective. Sort of a little bit of a buzz with the West Virginia Mountaineer football team leading into Rich Rodriguez's second season back in Morgantown. So plenty of content to get into, and you are listening to the latest edition of the All Eers podcast, a WVU sports-based podcast here at HD Media and the Charleston Gazette-Mail. I'm your host, Taylor Kennedy. Thank you all for joining us. However you may be listening to us, you can find us on Spotify, you can find us on Apple Podcasts, and you can also find us on YouTube as well. All the links for that are in the description of this podcast. You can also find us on our social media channels. We are on Twitter at Gazmail Sports, that's G-A-Z, Mail Sports, and on Facebook on our brand new Facebook page at All Eers, that's ALL''EERS, All Eers. Football season is upon us, and teams nationwide are gearing up for this upcoming season. And what we're going to do is we're going to preview a lot of football between now and September 5th, whenever the Mountaineers take on Coastal Carolina in Morgantown. And my thought was we're going to take it from a couple of different angles. Obviously, you'll get my perspective, Mitch Vingle's perspective. We'll hear from some of the Mountaineers leading into week one. But one of the things I wanted to do is talk about from a national perspective. I know so often we hear about WVU and WVU football within the confines of the Mountain State. But what is the outlook, or what is the perception of this Mountaineer team leading into year two from a national perspective with West Virginia? And we got a great guest lined up for you guys today. I reached out to a few different people, but we're very pleased to be joined by Chris Vannini. I hope I said that right.
Yes, you did.
Yeah, okay. So we're welcomed by Chris Vannini from The Athletic. He is a national college football reporter. And Chris, welcome to the program.
Happy to be here. Football season is upon us. I'm excited, and pronounce the name right. All good.
Yeah. Hey, listen, that's a good way to start the podcast. As long as we get that right, hey, it's smooth sailing from here, right?
Absolutely.
So, Chris, to start, obviously, West Virginia did not have the season that they would have wanted last season under Coach Rich Rodriguez, only winning a couple of games, including a backyard brawl overtime victory over the Pitt Panthers in September. But now that we're leading into year two with Coach Rodriguez, what's kind of your perspective, or what are you hearing from a national perspective with this West Virginia team?
Well, I'm really intrigued by this team. It's one of the teams I'm kind of most interested to see, like, if the pieces fit this time around. Because last year, going into year one, you knew, like, the pieces of a Rich Rodriguez offense weren't really there. And it was going to take a little bit to get it there. And now when you enter year two, and as the portal was going on last winter, I see West Virginia add Cam Cook, who I really like. I see them add Michael Hawkins Jr. And I go, okay, these are the pieces of a Rich Rodriguez offense. They might be putting something together here. Now, there's obviously questions on the entire defense and a little bit on the offensive line that's very important. But I think I can see an identity of this team going into the season when it was really kind of hard to see in year one, when it's like, oh, we got some running backs, but nothing on the offensive line, and just figure it out. I think you can see what they're going for now.
You mentioned something early on. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it sounds like that this is a team that you are keening in on throughout the course of the season. I know they'll play September 5th against Coastal Carolina, and then round out non-conference with UT Martin and Morgantown, then the Virginia Cavaliers and Charlotte. But is this a team that a lot of national people are starting to key in on, and kind of just like they're not really putting too much pressure on them, but they're kind of keeping them in their back pocket per se, and saying, okay, they have a chance, like you said, they have the pieces. How far can they go? Does that kind of align with what you're saying?
Yeah, and look, the Big 12 is an incredibly deep conference, and almost everybody in it, except for maybe Iowa State, like, you can see the upside on. But I think this is a West Virginia team that should be competing for a bowl game, should I don't, maybe not expecting, but like that's the goal. Like get to a bowl game, get to 6-6. The schedule is workable. You know, the conference, there's nothing that's like guaranteed, but other than Texas Tech, you could like make a case like, hey, maybe they surprise them in a couple of these games here. So yeah, it's hard, you know, the Big 12 is so crowded in the middle. After BYU and Texas Tech, you could pick 10 teams, you know, that could make a run for third, fourth, fifth. And things click. I think West Virginia could be one of those teams.
So I know we're talking more just, you know, a little bit of excitement from both of us in this conversation, but just on the flip side of that now, what questions do you have from a national perspective with this year's West Virginia team?
Well, offensive line, it was just a mess last year, and understandably, it just didn't have the numbers. And is it better? You got a couple of starters coming back. There's a lot of juniors and seniors you're probably going to be starting here. You brought Rick Trickett back, you know, the longtime West Virginia coach guy. And you added some transfer linemen who started elsewhere. So these are guys with experience. This is a much more experienced offensive line. So that's my question. Can it click? Can you portal a line together decently? That's historically been pretty tough to do. But that's key. And then the other part is the defense. There's not a single starter back. Now, again, experienced guys come into the portal. I think Zach Alley's a good coach. But just total question mark on defense. There's nothing you can point to and say like, oh, yeah, based on what we saw last year, I think that's what they're going to lean on. It's just totally new. And when that's an entire half of the ball, you know, it's concerning.
You mentioned two really important pieces, obviously, to a football team, but also just with guys in those positions on the offensive line, especially. You get Kevin Brown, a freshman out of Pennsylvania that was very sought after by a variety of Division I teams, including the team that he originally committed to in Penn State whenever James Franklin was there. Then when Franklin was fired and went to VT, he reopened, and then everybody knows he announced on the Pat McAfee show. But then on defense, you have Matt Sieg, another Pennsylvania guy that Coach Rodriguez has mentioned before, could possibly play both sides of the football. From a standpoint of the youth and the transfers, and even just some of these high school guys that Coach Rodriguez and the rest of his staff brought in, where does that lie with other Big 12 recruiting classes leading into the 2026 season?
Well, I mean, look, Kevin Brown may have had the greatest commit, you know, we've ever seen in the history of the sport. To go on McAfee show and burn a couch after that. I remember watching that as was happening. It was incredible. It was unbelievable.
They got a lot of fans riled up, to say the least.
Yeah. In terms of recruiting elsewhere, I don't have the recruiting rankings in front of me. I have the last couple of years put a lot less stock into them outside of like the top 5-ish, because it's like, how many of these guys are going to be here the next year? We don't know. The number of guys transfer so much. Like, if you're recruiting well, that's a good sign. If you're not recruiting well, typically not a good sign. You know, like, we knew a couple of years ago it was not going well for Florida State because Mike Norvell was not recruiting well. Not that you have to recruit well, but you're recruiting poorly at a place like Florida State. It was going to come back to get them. And I think with what you've seen, there is an effort by West Virginia to identify these key pieces, these local pieces. These are the guys you got to get. Kevin Brown's a guy you got to get. And you follow through and you do that. That's the step of the foundation for where you want to get in a couple of years.
You mentioned how Cam Cook is one of the players that you're most interested in this season. What stands out to you about him, and what do you think he brings to this West Virginia team coming from Jacksonville State?
Well, he can just be a bell cow. I don't remember. I think he was, I'm looking at him now, I think he was one of the top attempt guys. Yeah, he had the third most rushing attempts in the country last year, 295. Still averaged 5.6 yards per carry. So, like, this is a guy who can carry the load in a sport that doesn't have a lot of those guys anymore. And so some of the other, you know, pieces around running back as well, I think are pretty good. But, you know, Jaheim White getting hurt last year early on just really obviously wrecks any semblance of a season. Cam Cook has shown he can take a lot and he can handle that load. And I think that's what you're going to want to see. You're going to want to lean on him. Really liked him at Jacksonville State last year. Been a couple of places. It was big for them to grab him. Has a great year. They almost win Conference USA. Now he's back up here with Rich Rod and a lot of the people he's familiar with. So, yeah, just a guy who you can rely on, like a solid piece. I think it's going to be really interesting.
Quarterback-wise, I know you mentioned Michael Hawkins, and he comes in from Oklahoma. West Virginia also brings back Scotty Fox, who had a very good second half of the season in his true freshman year with West Virginia. In regards to similarities or differences that you're seeing from the two of them, what stands out to you about Hawkins especially? We know what Scotty has, but for those that may not know who Michael Hawkins is thoroughly or just in general, what do you see from him and what do you think he brings to this team?
Well, he's just crazy athletic, just extremely fast. It's what fits in a Rich Rodriguez offense. It didn't fit him at Oklahoma and the different offenses they were doing, whether it was Seth Luttrell or Ben Arbuckle. So him going somewhere else made sense. I think going to a place to play for someone like Rich Rod is perfect. Like that's his best attribute. He's electric. He's flashy. He can throw the ball, but running is really where his strength will be, and that's what you run in this offense. So I think it's a great fit for what. Now they haven't named a starter, I don't believe, right? That's
Correct.
Still going on that
Yep.
battle, at least as of the time we're talking here. So we'll see. I mean, it's possible Scotty Fox does enough to keep the job, win the job again. But I think the upside with Michael Hawkins running that offense is pretty evident if he can get it all together.
It also seems like Rodriguez is not afraid or shy in playing multiple quarterbacks. He even mentioned last year during some of his press conferences, like, hey, if we have the best opportunity to win a football game with multiple quarterbacks, we're going to do that. I mean, that was very apparent in the Pitt game. I mean, he played Nico Markiel, he played Max Brown, and he also played Scotty Fox. I mean, how often do you see three quarterbacks play before the fourth quarter starts? But unless you're playing like an FCS team or, a low-tiered group of five team. I mean, it's very rare, especially when you play a Power 4 team in a very heated rivalry game. So I don't know if that will translate into this season. I don't think Rodriguez would want to do that again. I think that would probably hurt his heart rate in a sense. I think he'd probably be a little bit more stressed. But I'm interested to see what Hawkins does. I know a lot of people are very high on him. I'm just one of those guys, and you're probably the same way. Just if you have all this buzz with you, just go out and prove it. Bottom line, if you can't prove it, then next guy up. Hopefully, you can try and fill in the shoes as well. But kind of going back to the Big 12 now, I know you mentioned how you have Texas Tech, BYU as the top two. I lean more BYU just in regards to winning the conference. But after those two teams, you mentioned how there's a plethora of teams in this year's Big 12 conference that could honestly vie for being a top 5 team in the league. Who's a team in your mind that is not getting talked about enough that could arguably finish within that top 5, especially in that top 3?
Well, I'm really high on Oklahoma State, but I think a lot of people are talking about them. So I'll go Arizona, who I think was really quietly winning 9 games last year. They bring Noah Fafita back. He'll be one of the best quarterbacks in the country. Chase Kennedy on defense. They really, really, really like him. And I think Brent Brennan has shown to be a real solid, good coach who kind of knows what works for him. And we talked to him a year ago at Media Days after their difficult first season. And he was saying when he got there, I was too much of a yes man. I was begging kids to stay, all this kind of stuff. And then he said, going into year 2, I'm like, screw that. If you don't want to be here, get out of here. I want guys who want to be here. And he found those guys, and they had a really solid season last year. So I think with the pieces they've got Texas Tech, Utah, and Arizona State all at home. Schedule's decent. They might be a team we're not talking about enough. Like, we're talking about Houston, we're talking about Oklahoma State. We always talk about Utah, but Arizona might be a team I think maybe to keep an eye on more.
That's a really good point by you, because I think especially bringing back Noah, that's a big piece to that team that led them to winning 9 games a year ago, as you alluded to. I'm in the same boat as you. I wasn't initially, but once you started making the case, you started twisting my arm a little bit, and I'm like, Okay, I can kind of see it. The schedule's favorable to an extent, but at the same time, as long as you're winning games and you're playing for a bowl game and you're competing at a very high level, I do agree with you. I could see Arizona. I think Houston is another one. I know Houston gets talked about a lot, but the way that they ended last season, I mean, they were one of the hotter teams in America, and they were finished right there in the top 25. I mean, that's another team with Willie Fritz as the head coach. I mean, that team is just always competitive and has been, but they showed it down the stretch last year. So I think Arizona, I'm with you. Arizona and Houston are probably the two teams that I'm looking into seeing who can rise amongst the rest of the pack and compete even more so. But from a betting perspective now, I know we're talking more Big 12 and West Virginia now, but going back to West Virginia, I'm looking on DraftKings Sportsbook, and West Virginia, it looks like that they're putting that line right at about 4.5 wins. If you go on it right now, it's they have three separate boxes or three separate rows, I should say, and it's right now over 4.5 is minus 320, over 5.5 minus 160, over 6.5 is plus 150. So between those numbers and those odds, I don't know if you're a betting man or not, but with those odds, where do you lie in regards to West Virginia's future in this 2026 season?
Yeah, I think I like the over 4.5. I'm right on that 5 to 6 type of range. It's just there's so many new pieces that I don't feel confident saying it. I like the potential of Michael Hawkins and Cam Cook running that offense. We haven't seen it. We haven't seen the defense. That is a completely new set of starters. So it's one of those teams where I could see the over 4.5. I look at the schedule, Coastal, UT Martin, Iowa State, Kansas, Cincinnati. You got to feel pretty good about those games. And then if you can find one somewhere else that gets you to 6 to get you to a bowl game. So 4.5, I would take that. 5.5, 6, I'm right around there. We're preseason with a lot of questions. I'm not quite sure yet.
So one thing I do want to ask you, from looking at West Virginia media, I know sometimes some fan accounts go a little over-exaggerated, as you all know, but one game that people keep talking about, I'm kind of paying more and more attention to this as we get closer to it, that game on September 19th against Virginia at Bank of America Stadium in Charlotte, I think is arguably the biggest game in the first half of the season. Not just because it's another P4 non-conference game, but it's because it's your last game of non-conference. You get Oklahoma State the following week to start Big 12 conference play. That, to me, is the game to where this team can go, how far this team can go, but at the same time, if the Mountaineers lose, does that set them back? How do they rebound? Because, again, you're playing Oklahoma State, and a lot of people are really high on this team despite having a first-year head coach. That game to me is a little tricky. What says you about that game on September 19th against Virginia?
Yeah, that's the game where if you win that, probably 3-0 at that point, and that's the win that opens up all right, bowl game should be happening this season. That's the one we think, all right, that's because Virginia's I think going to be a pretty good team. Bo Prevula at quarterback, who's got a high ceiling. They got a good offensive line, got a couple of running back transfers. They got an experienced secondary, and I think they're going to do pretty well in the ACC because they avoid Miami as well. So Virginia's a team I think could end up having a pretty good year. So if West Virginia is able to get that win, that's one of those real set the tone going into conference play. Get that confidence up as you go play an Oklahoma State team that could be lighting it up at that point. Yeah, I think that's exactly one of those early season games that can change the direction of the season.
A couple more for you, and we're talking with Chris Vannini from The Athletic, a national and Big 12 beat writer. Chris, when you look at the storylines surrounding the Big 12 conference this season, I know there's a few different schools, I think it's 4 to be exact, that have brand new head coaches, including Colin Klein, back at his alma mater, coaching, being the head coach at Kansas State. What storylines pop out to you as we enter the month of August and we are getting closer and closer to the upcoming 2026 season?
I think the narrative for any conference comes from the top. and we're kind of seeing, like, the narrative for the Big Ten being so dominant is because they won 3 straight national championships with 3 different teams. The bottom of the conference is terrible, the Big Ten. Like, the SEC is a deeper conference, but everybody is judged by what you do at the top. So Texas Tech wins its first conference championship in decades last year. They are the clear, beat everybody by 10 plus, carrying the banner for the conference. They go get shut out in the playoff game against Oregon. And ultimately, that's why they go get Brendan Sorsby. They got to have better offense, take that step forward. Now Sorsby's out, the whole gambling thing. Can the top of the Big 12, can you get those non-conference wins in places that will help the Big 12 come playoff time? Because something a lot of SEC people are throwing around right now is, hey, look, Mississippi State, bottom of the conference in the SEC, they beat Arizona State last year. We think the Big 12 is a joke. That's what's coming from the SEC. So the Big 12 needs to find these non-conference wins. A West Virginia game is a good example. And grab those wins where you can, because Texas Tech doesn't really have a chance. Their schedule is pretty simple this year. BYU and Texas Tech don't play each other. They're both probably going to be like 10-2, 11-1 or better. So can the conference pick up some non-conference wins to just kind of boost that resume going into the playoff? And then in the playoff, whoever wins the conference, can they put up a competitive fight? Can they win a game? I think that's what the league needs right now, because the ACC got that last year with Miami going to the national championship game. Even if you think the league is not great, they nearly won the national championship. That is how every conference is judged. Big 12 still needs to show it has teams at the top that can do that.
Do you think that there is a resurgence or a reignition in just spirit and fire with this BYU team last year? Because a lot of teams, a lot of people, including myself, quite frankly, thought that this Cougars team or last year's Cougars team could have been one of those 12 teams to make the college football playoff, and rightfully so. Now granted, both your losses came to Texas Tech, and you didn't really, from a statistical standpoint, you didn't really put up too much of a fight, but you return really key pieces in quarterback Bear Bachmeier and running back LJ Martin. They got the pieces back that could arguably make them again another contender to be one of those 12, one of those final 12 teams in this year's college football playoff. Are you kind of seeing that from a national perspective with just what BYU's returning compared to how last year ended?
Yeah, the advanced metrics loved BYU last year. Like they were ranked lower than the metrics had them, and that is something the SEC people kind of yelled at the playoff people about in spring this year, which was like, why is BYU ranked so high? They didn't beat anybody of note. And it's a fair point. And when I asked Kalani Sitake about that, he makes the point that I kind of make, which is like, look, BYU had a chance to make the playoff. If it wins the Big 12 championship game, it's in. You can play you had your opportunity. And twice against Texas Tech, they weren't even close. So there wasn't really an argument for BYU to be in over somebody else when they lacked those wins, when they had those opportunities to show that they were on that level, and they weren't. But going into this year, I really like this team. I wonder if I'm underrating them in my mind, because Bear Bachmeier last year, very up and down at times. But I always got to remind myself, he got there in the summer. Mm-hmm. Like he had gone through spring at Stanford, transferred to BYU, gets the starting job, going through all of this the first time, and played pretty well on the whole. And so they're really high on him going into year 2. You got LJ Martin at running back, really good player. You got to find the receivers. Who's going to step up there? That's the question mark. But the defense should be really solid again. They don't play Texas Tech in the regular season this year. So, I think BYU could be one of those teams that we're like, yeah, good, solid program, but actually, maybe they're 11-1 or 12-0, toward the end of the season, and they're in that playoff position.
2 more questions for you, and I want to get your prediction. I know as we're recording this, we're just about a week or so away from the end of the month of July, with August right around the corner. Then obviously college football starting at the end of the month, first weekend of September. Give me your prediction. Who do you think is going to be playing on Championship Saturday in Texas for the Big 12 Conference Championship game?
It's it's the easiest thing. It's what everybody will say, but I do think it's Texas Tech and BYU in the championship game, in part because, again, they don't play each other in the regular season. So that's one fewer loss between the two of them. I think both of these defenses are really, really good. I think Will Hammond is a really solid quarterback. Brendan Sorsby obviously would have been better, would have put them over the top. But they, again, did really well in the portal. We saw last year that team hits on their portal targets. Like, they know who to go after, who they get. They usually do a really good hit rate and get those guys to gel together. You got the coaches back and all that kind of stuff too. So I think it's Texas Tech. I think it's BYU in the championship game. And I'm going to go with Texas Tech again. Like, even though you missed out on Sorsby, I still like a lot of their pieces. They were 10 points better than everybody else in the conference last year. Like, they were just so far ahead of everybody else. And I'm going to ride with that until I see a reason if they've taken a step back. But I don't think I've seen that yet.
Final question for you, and I know each and every season there's always a short list, maybe even sometimes a bigger list of coaches that are, quote, on the hot seat. In your mind, is there a coach or a few coaches for that matter that are on the hot seat leading into this upcoming season?
Yeah, it starts with Baylor, Dave Aranda, who maybe wouldn't be here right now if Baylor didn't have their mess with their athletic director and having to fire him late last season. That made making a coaching change very difficult. So Dave Aranda came back out another year. He's very much on the hot seat. I think elsewhere, like, Cincinnati's tough because they really like Scott Satterfield, but the resources there are very difficult. Like, it's hard for them to win relative to the rest of the league based on what he's dealing with. But you lose the last 4 or 5 games of last season after starting off 7-1. If they have a rough year, that could be one to keep an eye on. And then it's not really hot seat, but Colorado, Deion Sanders, he's had a lot of health issues. He does seem to be better, having seen him in spring and media day. He does look better than he did a year ago. But people always wonder, will he retire at some point? Could the health be too much? I don't think they're going to fire him necessarily, but I think that's another one I'd be interested in. But there was a decent amount of turnover at various spots where we'll see.
Well, Chris, we appreciate your time and just chatting with us from a national perspective about not only the West Virginia Mountaineers, but also the Big 12 Conference in totality. So, again, thank you for your insight with this, and have fun this season. And I know we'll definitely keep in touch as the days and months go by this season.
Yep, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. There he is, Chris Vannini, a national and Big 12 conference beat writer for The Athletic. You can be sure to check him out on social media, on Twitter. We'll tag him as well in the description of this podcast and as well with our social media posts. Coming up next, we're going to be joined by former Charleston Gazette-Mail sports editor and WVU beat writer Mitch Vingle as we continue our discussion talking about football. Now we're just keying in on the West Virginia Mountaineers and what we are both seeing ahead of the upcoming season. This is All Ears.
HD Media Game Day is your streaming home for the best in live high school sports across West Virginia. Featuring football, basketball, soccer, and more, HD Media Game Day brings the action to you for free, exclusively on our YouTube channel and at hdmediagameday.com. When you can't make it to the game, HD Media Game Day has you covered.
As the game gets faster, stronger, more dynamic, your equipment has to keep up. Introducing the Riddell Axiom, the next evolution in football protection, designed to match the speed and strength of today's athlete. Contact West Virginia Riddell representative Casey Turley at 304-552-5960. Gear up, play smart, stay protected.
Final segment here of the All Ears podcast, a WVU sports-based podcast. We're continuing along our conversation about the upcoming 2026 WVU football season. We just spoke in our last segment with the Athletics' Chris Vannini, so special thanks to him. If you haven't already, stop this conversation, stop this podcast, go back, catch up where we're at, because you want to buckle up again because we're continuing this conversation with former WVU beat writer and Charleston Gazette-Mail sports editor Mitch Vingle for this week's Vingle's Views. And Mitch, welcome back to the program yet again. I know I keep saying that, but it always feels good just to kind of introduce you each week.
Well, I appreciate it, and it's always fun to get back to my roots. So I always enjoy it, man.
You know what's weird? I know it's August and everything, but there's been like a couple of days. Well, it's actually late July. It's about to turn August at the end of this week. But what's so weird is like it feels like the last week and a half, early couple of weeks of August, the last few years, kind of feels like fall some days. Like I know it rained today as we're recording this on Tuesday, but I don't know. I don't know if I get like that weird like itch or just like that like a twitch. I don't know what word you want to call it. I just want the fall, period.
I told Johnny the other day it felt like fall. Like we always like to sit outside. And I said, it feels almost like football weather already. Of course, you know, the NFL, everybody's reported for camp. And, you know, we're definitely turned that way. That's for sure.
Well, the other thing is I saw this tweet, and it's always so funny to see a lot of these like football crazy Twitter accounts or just football crazy people in general that just tweet consistently about football. I forget who posted this, but it was over the weekend. It was actually on Sunday, actually. Someone said this is the last Sunday until like early February that we'll have football every weekend or just from here moving forward. At least one game a week from now moving forward to like the beginning of February. I said, I'll live with that. Give me that all the time. Just football. I don't care if it's the NFL, college football. I'll take it. You have a favorite NFL team?
Who's that?
You. Do you have a favorite NFL team?
No, I don't, and it's weird, and I hate it. But no, I don't have a favorite NFL team. I was one of those when I was a kid. Everybody around me, you know, liked the Pittsburgh Pirates, so I couldn't like the Pirates. And so my uncle came in. He had this New Jersey accent, and he liked the Mets. So as a little kid, I just started following the Mets. But in football, I just never did. The one team that I used to follow was Buffalo Bills, because A, I liked O.J. Simpson before he did what he did, and then B, Jim Braxton was his blocking back from West Virginia, and so as a kid I was always looking for that connection, that West Virginia connection, and you know, Simpson was setting all these records, but the guy in front of him blocking for him was from WVU. So he was my guy. So that's about as close as I ever came. Crazy, which is crazy. I mean, I follow the Steelers because they're right here, and you know, did some marketing work with them and stuff like that. So
now I could definitely see you having a shirt that said like the juice is loose, or you know, Vingle loves juice, or just something like that, right?
Yes. And you know, what was crazy is, and this is way off, but I actually was covering a Steeler game one time, and I always wanted to meet O.J. Simpson, and he had been a broadcaster. And this is right when cell phones came out, and so he's walking across the field, and he's talking on the cell phone, and I'm going up behind him just to say hi, and I hear him on the phone, and he's like, I don't care what they told you. I went on that flight. You tell them I'm O.J. Simpson. And it just turned me off so much to hear him big timing. And so that was – and then I saw him after all the other stuff. And anyway, that's a completely different story. But
well,
yeah.
I did not have O.J. Simpson on my bingo card for this episode, so congratulations. You have made the rare fill-in on the bingo card.
The rare U-turn to O.J. Simpson, yes.
As you said, there's always a West Virginia connection. But nonetheless, as we're talking Mountaineer football leading into the 2026 season, West Virginia opens up its regular season against Coastal Carolina on Saturday, September the 5th, which is a noon kickoff inside Milan Puskar Stadium. Mitch, I'll kind of lead with you like how I did Chris Vannini from The Athletic. As we're just a few weeks away from the beginning of the 2026 regular season, what stands out to you, or what question marks do you have, or questions do you have with this year's group, with Coach Rodriguez back for his second year in his second stint?
Well, is the offense going to take that next step? I mean, West Virginia has to get relevant, like now. I mean, it's been too long. And, you know, I go on Twitter and I see Ohio State gets their patch, and they're going to get like, $15 million a year for a patch on their uniform. I saw Notre Dame is getting like $18 million a year for the patch on their uniform. And West Virginia has to get better. They have to become nationally relevant again, because they're getting behind, man. And it's time to pick it up. It's time to get back to that Rich Rodriguez, offense that we knew and loved way back when. And, hopefully you see that with, I guess, if it's Michael Hawkins at quarterback and, Cam Cook and those guys, and, you got some linemen. So it needs to happen now. That's the big thing for me.
Let me ask you this, because from a media perspective, obviously we haven't done a ton during the summer in regards to football. It seems like obviously baseball had its moment that led into the middle part of June, late part of June, I should say. And then from there, it's kind of been dead. Like the whole month of July, outside of Big 12 Football Media Day, haven't really had a whole lot of football talk, if that makes sense. I mean, people are trying to figure out, like what you just said, how's this offense going to look? Is Michael Hawkins going to be the starter? Is Scotty Fox going to be the starter? What does Cam Cook bring to the table? What does the offensive line look like? How does Jaden Bray kind of assemble that wide receiver room and kind of push them forward? Yeah, the offense to me is what stands out. But the other side of it too is from a media perspective, Mitch, this is where I was kind of leading with this. Does it concern you at all in regards to how little that we've seen from a football perspective of like what's been coming out of like summer workouts? Like obviously the social media team at WVU pushes some stuff, and I know they did like an old school retro video with Jack Fleming's voiceover not too long ago. But does it kind of concern you that we haven't really seen a whole lot from like a first person point of view with this group?
Yeah, and some of that is access, obviously. Back in the day when I was covering W all the time, especially when I was in Morgantown I was there for 10 years. I mean, Taylor, we would go to every practice, watch every minute of every practice every day. I mean, it made for really long days, but we got to see what was going on. We respected, the privacy, but we were able to see, okay, do they have the studs up front? Do they have, or what is the pecking order on the depth chart? Is there movement here and there? And there was information coming out all the time. Now, it was really nothing that was going to help opponents, but we got a feel for it. Mm-hmm. And I remember Don England talking one time about whether he thought his team was going to be good or not, and he was saying, kind of go look at your depth chart, especially your starting lineup, and you go, is this guy, a stud? You put a check mark by him. How about this guy? And you go down the lineup and add up all the check marks, and you can kind of tell whether, the team's going to be any good or not. And as writers who were there and followed and saw up close, we were able to get a good idea as well. I mean, of course, you never know how the season's going to end up, but you had a better feel than what we get these days.
Yeah, but I think in large part, and this is kind of where I see like both sides of it, like obviously in today's society, in today's day and age of collegiate athletics, you kind of want to be as hush-hush as possible with what's going on with you, just because you don't want to give that advantage. Now, granted, I'm not saying what's happening now wasn't the same 30, 40 years ago by any means, but with just the other factors that loom in college athletics today with like NIL, the transfer portal, the 5-for-5 rule, whatever it is, I just have a feeling that Rodriguez and his crew are being a lot more together. And then whenever that comes, that first game against Coastal Carolina, and then even week 2 and week 3 against UT Martin and Virginia, that's whenever they're like, okay, this is what we got. Here's what we got. You guys meaning like the fan base and media per se. This is what you could take away from what we're doing. Because a lot of this stuff is happening behind closed doors, locked doors, behind the scenes. That's just normal. We get that. But in regards to what we could expect, like what you're saying, like who's going to be a stud, like you kind of already know, especially with the transfer portal, like a Cam Cook, for example. We know Cam Cook was one of the top rushers in the country last season. He was actually number 1 in total rushing yards nationally a season ago at Jacksonville State. We know that. Michael Hawkins, we know that he played just a few games at Oklahoma, but the film that we've seen, he can be a really good quarterback. But at the end of the day, how does it all mesh together? And it just goes back to what you said. You just don't know, and it kind of helps whenever you do go to camp or you do go to practice, and you're like, okay, Kevin Brown, stud. We can already say that. Same thing with Hawkins, Bray. The other thing is too, like, how's Jaden Bray going to look this year? I mean, he only played 2 games last year after he hurt his leg against Ohio. What does he look like? What does he bring? What do these other receivers?
About the Epps kid,
yeah, DJ Epps, Prince Strachan as well. I mean, what do those guys bring as well? I mean, there's so many different pieces, and then defensively, you're just thinking, who the heck's going to play? I mean, you lost so much last year, but I think the one group on defense that I'm very confident in this year, just from what the Mountaineers return, is the linebacker room. I mean, obviously you get a guy like Ben Cutter. You get Ben Cutter back, you got a dude. And what I mean by a dude, I mean you got a guy that could be a freaking leader and will probably be the leader for this group just because he had a year playing for Zach Alley last year. I just, I'm with you in a lot of different ways. And it kind of leads me to my next point, and that is, next question I should say. One of the other things that Chris and I talked about in our last segment, Mitch, was, was there a specific game that we thought was the game that could define what this season looks like for the Mountaineers? I mean, obviously, as I mentioned,
think there are 2 of them.
Yeah, well, I'll give you mine real quick. And you look at it from a non-conference, you got Coastal, UT Martin, Virginia. Then you start Big 12 play against Oklahoma State. So you're right in the mix. That Virginia game, to me, that's the game. I mean, I know I'm interested to hear what your 2 are, but that Virginia game, to me, if you can win that game, you're probably going to a bowl. If you lose that game, I hate to say this, you may be on the other side of having a losing season, because that game you win against a P4 opponent. You're going in the conference play with a lot of emotion, a lot of expectations. You're on that emotional high. You can kind of play with that emotional high to an extent, but I think that win can really boost this crew moving forward into the thick of the Big 12 conference schedule. So what 2 games do you think are the 2 most important ones this season?
Well, I agree that Virginia, when I first looked at the schedule, I thought, maybe West Virginia has a chance at 7 or 8 wins. And then you look up you do a little bit more study, and you see, like you said, that Virginia game is huge. I mean, I think they're picked to finish, 3rd in the ACC?
Yeah, something like that.
They've got their defense coming back. I mean, that's going to be tough. They're going to have a lot of fans, in Charlotte, just like West Virginia will. So that one, as you said, you would hope that West Virginia can not struggle a lot with Coastal Carolina, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's the thing. When they play Coastal Carolina at the beginning of the year, I'm hoping they're able to roll, and I think obviously they're going to roll past UT Martin. But, okay, let's say everything breaks right. Okay, and then it comes to that Virginia game, like you said. I think the other game is toward the end of the year, and you're going to cringe when you hear it, but Texas Tech. I mean, they cannot get hammered
yeah, that's true.
by Texas Tech again, because they still will have, after that, they'll still have Kansas, Houston, Utah, and all three of those teams could beat West Virginia. You would hope West Virginia can beat Kansas, but Houston should be decent this year. You know, it's the last game's at Utah. I mean, the Mountaineers don't play BYU this year, which helps. But yeah, I'm with you. I mean, it could be 6-6, but if they would win that Virginia game, and that's the kind of game, if you look back when Rich Rod first got the ball rolling at West Virginia back in the day, I mean, those are the kind of games they did win. You know, they did beat a Virginia Tech. You know, they won some statement games, and that's something that Neil Brown never did. I mean, he beat Pitt here and there, but
you don't think that Virginia game, that Virginia Tech game in 2022 wasn't a big game, key win?
Yeah.
I'm just asking. This conversation. Well, I think there's one other game real quick when talking about this season for WVU. The other game to me that I think could be another huge game is the Cincinnati game at home on October the 17th, which is a Saturday. You know, when you look at West Virginia's schedule, up to that point, they would have played Oklahoma State, Iowa State, and Arizona. Two of those first three conference games were against coaches or against teams that have first-year head coaches in Oklahoma State and Iowa State. And you go even broader than that, three of the four teams that have new coaches in the conference this season will play West Virginia at some point, with the other one being Utah, as you mentioned. That's the regular season finale. So you'll play the first two games of conference play against brand new coaches, then your last game of the regular season against another first-year head coach. But from the standpoint of Cincinnati, you go Oklahoma State at home, Iowa State on the road in Ames, and you got Arizona at home, who I think, and I know Chris and I mentioned this in our last segment, Arizona is one of the teams to me that could be a sleeper in the Big 12, and especially with the fact that you return a quarterback in Noah Fafita that is an electric guy. He plays really, really well at his position, and you also look at this, the conference, from a quarterback perspective. He's probably one of the top four, in my opinion, in the league. And, you know, they're going to be playing with their hair on fire as well, especially when they come to Morgantown. But from the Cincinnati perspective, that's the first game that kicks off the second half of the regular season, because when they play, after they play Cincinnati, they go TCU on the road, Texas Tech on the road, and then, as you mentioned, Kansas, Houston, and Utah to conclude the regular season. But for Cincinnati as well, this is where I think this gets more of an important game for West Virginia, because Cincinnati opens against Boston College, Western Carolina, Miami of Ohio, and their non-conference. But then West Virginia is only their third conference game of the season, because they'll open with Kansas State on September 26th, then go on the road to Arizona on October the 3rd. You start the first two games in league play if you're Cincinnati against two really dynamic quarterbacks. I mentioned Noah Fafita from Arizona, but Avery Johnson from Kansas State is a dude and has proven that he is a dude. And especially you add in the fact that you have Colin Klein as the first-year head coach for Kansas State as well. That I'm very interested to see how that Kansas State team plays out. But kind of tying this all back together, if Cincinnati is, you know, let's just hypothetically, they win their three non-conference games, then they lose against Kansas State and Arizona, they're going into that game against West Virginia 3-2. There's already murmurs of Scott Satterfield from Cincinnati being on the hot seat. And you add in the fact that if Cincinnati were to lose to West Virginia, now you're looking at 3-3. You got Texas Tech, Utah, and Houston. Woo! I mean, Cincinnati's going to be coming into that game wanting to play passionate just because they don't want to lose their coach. But at the same time, they could lose their coach if they lose that game, and then they go into those next three games after West Virginia 3-3. They could lose Scott Satterfield. So that's another really big game just from, I know it's a regional rival in a lot of different ways, but the emotional standpoint for both sides, it's the second half of the season, started the second half of the season for West Virginia. But if, again, with Cincinnati, if you're 3-2 going into that game, you're 3-3, yeah, you could probably lose your coach. So those, I think both of us, I think, are correct. I think the Virginia game, obviously. I was really interested and very curious with where you were going with the Texas Tech game, but it makes sense. And then that Cincinnati game to me is just really, really important as well.
And to play off your point, okay, let's say West Virginia goes 2-1 against Oklahoma State, Iowa State, and Arizona, and then leading up to that Cincinnati game, like you're talking about, right? Now, let's say they win that, or even split with TCU. Go at Texas Tech with some momentum, play well, and then win out. Now you're looking at a totally different thing. So Cincinnati, that can be one of those important games as well because it can help you. That Texas Tech game from last year just still bothers me how they just got pummeled, you know? And it's time for West Virginia to step up and not have any more performances like that in the near future.
I don't disagree. So I'll finish with this, and we're joined by former Charleston Gazette-Mail sports editor Mitch Vingle. Record prediction, okay? I'm looking through the schedule right now, and I know I mentioned this with Chris Vannini from The Athletic in our last segment. The over-under line, the bottom, the base that they're allowing you to bet on for the over-under is 4.5 on DraftKings, okay? I love the over. I love the over 4.5. Where I get kind of iffy is, do I continue to go up and go up to 5.5, or do I go to 6.5? Because if you do 5.5, you're saying, okay, they're going to win 6 games. If you do 6.5, you're saying they're going to win 7 games. That's where I kind of get a little bit sketchy. But, you know, again, I'm just looking at this schedule. You win both games against Coastal Carolina and UT Martin. Okay, you're 2-0. Man, that Virginia game, man. I don't want to say you lose to Virginia. Right. You never want to lose against a regional rival or a regional opponent. But oh man, I'm just going to say.
And you got to understand, and you know too, Taylor. There's going to be a lot of not hubbub. I hate using that in 2026, but there's going to be a lot of jazz around that game. People are going to be juiced from both sides, and everybody's going to know it's going to be a telltale game. Just like, Virginia Tech used to be back in the day.
Yeah. So I'll just say for the sake of conversation, I'll say 3-0. Now you're going in the conference play. You got Oklahoma State, Iowa State, Arizona. I think you lose to Oklahoma State to begin conference play. Now you're 3-1. You go on the road and surprisingly win in Ames. Now you're 4-1. I think you lose to Arizona. You're 4-2. You beat Cincinnati. You're 5-2. You lose back-to-back against TCU and Texas Tech. Now you're 5-4. Yeah, 5-4. Or was that 5-3? Yeah, Oklahoma State. Yeah, 5-4. 5-4. Yep. Then you beat Kansas. Now you're 6-4. You lose to Houston because I think Houston's going to be one of the better teams. And that Utah game.
Yeah.
That Utah game is sketchy. I think you lose it. I think you lose at Utah.
Salt Lake City.
I think you lose at Utah. So I'll go 6-6. I'll be the what would it be? The even keeled guy. I'll go 6-6. What do you think?
Yeah. Well, if you want to look at it in a positive light, I think you go over the 5.5. I've seen 5.5 as you can find that. So I am saying over 5.5, but I'm exactly with you. I see 6 and 6. I think if they would pull off the upset against, and I'll be interested to see what the line is going to be between West Virginia and Virginia, right?
Oh yeah.
I would imagine West Virginia will be the underdog.
Mm-hmm.
So if they pull off the upset there, I think sky's the limit for the Mountaineers. If they just come out and play like gangbusters, like I said, like back in the day, what Richard Rod was able to win some of those statement games, then I I think it opens up all kind of promise for the Mountaineers. So let's go with that. We'll go 6-6, but one win, and that'll just open the floodgates. Let's go with that.
You know, and the other thing too is real quick. You know, I look at Virginia in a lot of ways. Like, you know, their quarterback room is very familiar to the Mountaineers and the fan base, in having both Bo Perbula and Eli Holstein in that quarterback room. And if you're the Mountaineers, you're kind of licking your chops and you're saying, "Ooh, give us Eli Holstein on that field. Let's see if we can rattle him again, like what they did against him whenever he played at Pitt last year in Morgantown." Just saying, could happen. But Bo Perbula is also pretty good too, so let's not forget about him. But nonetheless, I think we're both on the same page with this. I was actually very surprised that you're going with me with 6-6. So it makes me think I'm actually pretty good at what I do. I'm lying, obviously. But nonetheless, I am interested, as like you said, I am interested to see how this all plays out moving forward. So we'll watch together. We'll talk some more. We'll convene.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
All right, my friend.
And actually, that was one of my favorite things when I was in Charleston, was every year breaking down game by game and making a prediction. And I would have people that would cut it out to see how well I did on my predictions. And so I missed that stuff. But today was, reminiscent, so it was fun.
I'll take notes. I'll take notes on what you just said. But nonetheless, my friend, we appreciate your time as always. We'll get you out of here, but thanks for your insight. Thanks for your conversation as always, and we'll chat with you next week.
All right, buddy. It's always fun.
Yep.
See you next week.
Yep.
Bye-bye.
There he is, Mitch Vingle, former Charleston Gazette-Mail sports editor and WVU beat writer. That'll do it for us here on the All Ears podcast. Again, special thanks to Mitch Vingle for joining us, and Chris Vannini of The Athletic for all of his insight, talking Mountaineers and Big 12 Conference, and with a hint of some national stuff as well. So, again, as always, subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts, on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and on YouTube as well. You can also follow us on our brand new Facebook page at All Ears. That's an apostrophe EERS. And we will see you all next week. This is the All Ears podcast.
You have been listening to the All Ears podcast, powered by HD Media.